How are we? This is Chat UTD. Following up from last night's reaction to the Leeds game, just a few more thoughts in the cold light of day. I saw Carrick's post-match interview and certainly felt a little bit more connected to him actually, because he was fiery and he showed a different side to himself. He's normally quite calm and pragmatic, but also maybe a little bit dour. It was good to see him react with a bit of emotion to the officiating. He was clearly seething, and doesn't mean he should get the job. It doesn't mean that anything beyond the fact I just felt he reacted as I think I would react, but I would react far less filtered than he was, and it was good to see. But there is obviously a slightly different narrative around the whole thing after last night. And in the international break, I said it then, before last night, my concern is that we're playing survival football, but we're doing it pretty well. We're getting results, we're getting away with it, but there's only so long you will get away with it if that is indeed what you're doing. And last night was a stark reality check to say, yeah, that probably is what's been happening. But it's a big concern when you've had so long with the team. Not playing for 24 days as a team, obviously the players have been out on international duty, so they've not been idle for that amount of time. But not playing as a team for that amount of time doesn't necessarily mean you're going to come back fully refreshed and raring to go and that you're going to start the game well. I wasn't overly surprised we didn't start well, because there was probably going to be a bit of rustiness there. Or we'd start well but not be able to maintain it. It's that we were so bad, having had a week away together last week in Ireland. You're hoping that week would have served to air out any issues, have a bit of a powwow. Things need to be said, get them said. If you're a strong group and you're a group that are very connected, you'd expect them to come back from that time away with each other in a good frame of mind, and certainly not produce a performance like that. It was so basic. I look at Leeds last night, and we've made them look brilliant. Not just because we sat off them and we gave them too much space and we weren't getting out to them quickly enough and we weren't aggressive. Not just that, but because we were so bad, it made them look really good. How many unforced errors did we commit last night in the first half? Is there a stat on that? I know that they keep those statistics in tennis, don't they, for unforced errors. I'm not sure if it's part of the Opta statistics that are kept for football, but how many unforced errors did we commit? Casemiro was a big culprit. There was others as well, where there's time, there's space, there's loads of red shirts around, and we're giving the ball away inexplicably. You know, there's passes where the whole ground goes, oh God, well, what was that? That was, God, I don't even know how many times it happened in the first half. So all Leeds did last night was play basic, functional, half-decent football. But because we were so bad, it made them look good. I've said it on here. We're talking about spending between 70 and 100 million pounds on a midfield player, which, by the way, will not happen. But Ampadu for Leeds is all right. He gets the ball, he receives it quite well, he's neat and tidy, his positional sense is decent, he puts his foot in, he covers ground. He's a 20 to 30 million pound football player, and he would markedly improve our midfield. Well, he probably wouldn't, because he probably wouldn't come in and do that at United, but what I'm saying is he's not a brilliant player, but he given the performance for Leeds last night, would come in and improve United's midfield just by being a basic midfield player and doing the basics pretty well. That's a poor indictment on the midfield that we've got. Their left back, it wasn't great defensively. Is he called Goodmanson? We made him look like prime Roberto Carlos going forward. Teams always raise the game against United. And let's have it right. What we saw last night in terms of our levels and our performance, it's not new. Seen it. for the last for the last 13 years, let's be honest. But if we keep it relatively recent, we saw it under Solskjaer when we finished in the top 3 2 seasons in a row. We saw performances like that. When it was going well, we saw performances like that relatively regularly. With Ten Hag, we saw it. With Amrin, we certainly saw it. With Ranić, before Ten Hag, we saw it for most of the rest of that season. And we saw it again last night. But it's not a reason to say, oh, well, it's happened before, so never mind. It's not massively unusual. But the argument for Carrick, to bring it back to him, is that he's come in and arrested some of these things that have been going on for so long, and seems to have given us a direction, and seems to have sort of galvanised everybody. I think the bounce is over. I'm going to go back to something I've spoken about an awful lot since Carrick came in. It's the levels, it's your fundamentals. Against City and against Arsenal, those levels were through the roof, as you'd expect. What I mean by levels, getting out to the ball quickly, players covering each other, motivation, commitment, aggression, body language, not cutting corners on or off the ball, discipline, treating every passage of play and every duel as if your life depends on it. Those levels against City and against Arsenal were through the roof. Against Fulham, they were decent. Against Tottenham, they were decent. And then against West Ham away, where we got away with it and got a draw in the last knockings of the game, they dropped significantly. I think we played Everton after that. We won 1-0, but kind of got away with it. Again, they dropped. I don't think it's ever really picked up again since then in terms of those fundamentals, those levels. But what we saw last night was a further regression of those levels. They've dropped even further. And we're not good enough to do that. We're a very basic football team. The reason we've done all right under Carrick, I'm going to simplify it. Bruno finds Casemiro from set pieces. Bruno finds Maguire from set pieces. Cunha has moments of magic, and Seshko's been on a hot streak. That's why we've won games. And I think there's been a little bit more resilience and a little bit more of responding positively to adversity and sticking together, to be honest. But looking at the way we play, as I said in the break that we had with 24 days without a game, I'm not seeing anything that makes me want to see more of it. I've seen a guy come in, do the job that's been asked of him, galvanise people, do the basics better, get results, and get those levels up in the first few games like he did. But those levels are flatlined, and what we're seeing is he isn't able to motivate the players to get those levels higher. So what you want in the absence of that then is, I guess, a real firm structure in terms of framework and way of playing, and tactical astuteness, if that's a word, tactical adaptability, versatility, flexibility, and a little bit maybe of ingenuity to be able to offset perhaps those levels going down. And we haven't got that either. So you've got to ask the question as to if the board are thinking it's going to be Carrick. I don't want them flip-flopping and yo-yoing and thinking, well, we lost the game against Leeds, so therefore now it's not. I'd want them to have a bit of a more pragmatic view of it anyway, a more holistic view of it, rather than just the fact he's come in and got some results, which is what an interim manager is paid to do. I said it last night, I'm not ruling out that this can completely implode. Because for me, as I say, I think the bounce is done. And I'd love to be proved wrong, but I don't think this is a switch we can just switch back on again. So Chelsea at the weekend becomes a really big game. I'm not overly concerned about it, because I never want Man United to lose. This isn't what I'm saying. But this has happened loads of times over the years, where the only way we end up getting a common sense resolution to something is if the results go Pete Tom. Because so lacking is the foresight and insight and any football knowledge within the people that are making the decisions. We're going to have to implode for Carrick to not get the job. Now, I'm not so desperate for Michael Carrick to not get the job that I want us to implode. That's not what I'm saying. But if we lose against Chelsea, and if we do have a dip in these next couple of games, you bet your bottom dollar we'll start to hear stories about Nagelsmann being interviewed, about Enrique being top of the list, about Pochettino coming back into the fray. Maybe we're going to approach Emery from Aston Villa. Maybe Iraola comes into the conversation. We'll start to hear a lot more noise about that. As of yesterday afternoon, before the game against Leeds, and I said it last week, this football ownership structure would have been 85-90% given it to Carrick. In fact, I pretty much think it was done. But if it does start to go wrong, they'll give it the, don't be daft, that was never going to happen. We were always going to do this thorough process, but it'll take bad results for that to happen. That's how bad they are. That's how lacking in foresight they are. Because they've been watching what we've been watching. And I repeat what I've said before, Carrick has done a superb job as an interim manager. But there is a big difference between an interim manager and someone who becomes a permanent manager. Now, if an interim manager comes in and blows everybody away with the way that they play and win games, then that becomes a different conversation, a la Solskjaer. Carrick hasn't done that. We played extremely well for 2 games. We played well for a further 2 games. And we've been bang average since then, but got some decent results. And it's been a bit of a mixed bag. Let's have it right. That's what we've done. And he's collected a decent amount of points in the process. That's what an interim does. If he goes beyond that and the team plays superbly well and we're watching great football and we're seeing something that everybody wants to see more of, then that's different. And last night certainly again showed the shortcomings of the squad, which I've been banging on about for ages as well. You shouldn't rely on Harry Maguire at 33. And we missed him dreadfully last night in terms of a presence in the box, in both boxes. He wouldn't have been bullied by Calvert-Lewin like our defenders were, particularly Yoro. And we missed De Ligt. You almost forget about him because he's been gone for so long, but we do miss him. But I don't think we missed Mainu at all. It didn't help that we didn't have anyone on the bench really to come on. So it does show the shortcomings of the squad, but yeah, that was a really, really poor performance when you consider the team have been together, been away together. You're looking at a coach and his coaching staff to have had some impact on them that you can then see on the pitch. After a gap like that, we didn't see it. On a completely different note, this morning, the United Stand, which is hosted primarily by Mark Goldbridge, has, I think, kind of been bought, if you like, to be part of the Overlap, which means a collaboration between the Overlap and the United Stand, and Mark Goldbridge also has That's Football. Now, you can think what you want about the United Stand. It's got 2 million subscribers. And fair play to Mark Goldbridge. He started with a few people watching. He only did 1 video a week. I think it was sort of like 20 odd views, kind of like what I've got now, but I'm nearly 3 years into it. He's built it up into something of a behemoth in terms of fan channels. And whether we like it or not, those things are getting bigger and bigger and bigger and more important. And the mainstream media is the landscape of it is changing. I think it's really interesting just to sort of keep an eye on that collaboration, because whether you like him or not, Mark Goldbridge often holds the club to account. Often, if you can see past the the Alan Partridge element of him, he actually makes some very good points about the ownership. He does ask for accountability. He does expect more. He does want higher standards. He does call people out. He calls them out probably in a far more, what's the word? I was gonna say aggressive is probably the wrong word, but maybe even more forthright than me. Let's put it that way. But he calls it out, and he is going to go into a collaboration essentially with Gary Neville, who's part of the Regeneration Project, and I certainly think has a little foot in the door at United. And what I hope that does is the questions that are asked by people like Mark Goldbridge are asked and put out to a wider audience, and maybe makes it more high profile in a way where the club is held to accountability a little bit more by something quite mainstream like the overlap, or certainly puts those questions out there. Because you could love or hate Mark Goldbridge or be somewhere in the middle. The things that he says that you don't like will have a bigger audience, but either the things that he says that you do like, so for me it's the stuff about the ownership, I have certain things that he says I don't agree with at all, but there's things that he says that I completely agree with. That's going to be out to a wider group of people, and maybe more influential people. I've long since thought, if you've got 2 million subscribers and you want the Glazers out, could you do more? Now his argument would be, well, it's not my role to do that, but also of the 2 million subscribers, how many of them are the demographic that we need to be on board to get people like the Glazers out and Ineos out? I'm not sure. Genuinely, I don't know. So it's just something to keep an eye on. I think it's quite interesting, and there's a lot of cynical people that will say, oh, he's going to start probably towing the party line a little bit more now. He'll probably edit himself. If you've ever watched it, I don't think he can do that. I don't think that is part of his makeup. So that's interesting. For someone like me who desperately wants the Glazers to leave, and I know we need new ownership and a new start, we need it desperately to breathe life into the club. I think it's interesting to keep your eye on it. I don't think it'll end up being that we get new owners anytime soon, but if there's a big part of the media, and the big part of the media is now podcasts and things like Stick to Football and the Overlap and the United Stand, if two monsters of that industry come together and start asking more questions, what you might get then is the club held to account a little bit more, and that can sometimes lead to change in the way that they operate. It might not, but it's just something to keep your eye on. Okay, well, I think in the cold light of day, often it's good to do another video after a game, particularly when it's been disappointing like it was last night, and it's good to sort of process, for me anyway, and get those leftover things off my chest and look at the more holistic picture as well. Nice one. Glazers out.